Hello, and welcome to What's the Word, an electrical industry podcast. I'm Jason Cox.
And I'm Zach Hartle. We're thrilled to have you here today as we have another relevant conversation with someone from the electrical industry.
On this episode, we're speaking with Adam Ghani, Chief Electrical Inspector for the City of Calgary. We'll be talking about code interpretations, adoption of the 25th edition of the code, conductor color coding, and more. So have a listen. Welcome to the show, Adam.
Hey, good afternoon, Jason and Zach. How are you guys today?
Hey, doing great. It's great to have you here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So we're going to start off here, Adam, and can you just kind of give us a quick 2 minutes about your professional path and your background into becoming the Chief Electrical Inspector for the City of Calgary?
Yeah, absolutely, Jason. So I was an electrician right out of high school. I worked in a number of industries, residential, commercial, and service work. I also worked a number of years in the oil sands, and I took my master electrician training with SAIT. And while I was working in the oil sands, I wanted to be home more because, as you know, out of town work can be hard on a guy. So I did my safety codes officer certification when I was working out of town, and then I applied with the city and ultimately got the job as a safety codes officer. And I've been with the city for 14 years now, and in my 14 years, I've worked as a safety codes officer, senior safety codes officer, supervisor, and now the chief for the last 3 years.
So can you kind of tell us a little bit about those different levels of the safety inspector, maybe some of the different descriptions and maybe some of those specific tasks and jobs?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So our base level position is safety codes officer, and they conduct field inspections. We also have a phone we man, and that's called the Technical Assistance Center. So they answer code questions and permitting questions to customers when they receive those calls. And we have another role within our section that does plans examination. So we do have we do cursory reviews on electrical services that are 600 amps or larger, or over 600 volts, so high voltage services, and solar PV installations, underground installations that are 1 aught and larger. So those are the roles done. Those are the jobs done by the safety codes officers, and then in more of a leadership role is the senior safety codes officer. So they provide leadership and mentoring to the safety codes officers, and they generally will work on more complex jobs that come in, or they'll help safety codes officers with those more complex jobs.
So with that technical assistance center, I think that's somebody that maybe not everybody knows about. So maybe we could stop there for a sec. How could contractors working out in the field contact the technical assistance center and get some help with questions they have?
Yeah, so if you're a contractor and you're working in the city of Calgary under permit, you can call 311 and ask to speak to the Technical Assistance Center. And through the Technical Assistance Center, we handle questions on, of course, electrical, building questions, whether it's residential or commercial building questions, plumbing and gas, and also development questions.
Now that you're more of a leadership role, you're not the one out there doing so many of the field inspections, but what are some of the inspections mistakes or code misinterpretations that you're getting come back to you from the field?
Yeah, it's a great question, Zach. So a couple items. So overhead services in the Canadian Electrical Code, they're required to have a rigid steel mast of which is trade size 63. So that's a fairly large rigid steel mast. Now there is a variance in the Standata and it's a variance 2 rule 6112, which allows us to install smaller conduit sizes, but the specific requirements that are set out in the variance have to be followed. So for example, 1.25 inches is only so high above the roof line. Now, if we have to go higher than that, then of course we have to go up in conduit sizes. Sometimes we see, 1.25 inch ran like quite a bit higher than what's allowed in the variance, and then like they'll guy wire the conduit back to the roof line, which of course, as we know, isn't really covered in the variance. So if we're going to reduce the rigid steel mast size that is allowed in the standata, we need to follow the very specific requirements that are laid out in the standata. So yeah, so that's one item. And then the other item is underground installations. So rule 12-012. So just make sure that we're following the specific requirements in 12-012. And, like say when we're installing a tech cable, we're not installing it in a trench like that's full of large rocks or construction debris that can damage that cable. And also pay attention to the depths that we're installing those raceway systems or cables at. And also that if we are going to reduce the depth, because 12-012 allows you to reduce the depth if certain mechanical requirements are met. So we follow those mechanical requirements, mechanical protection requirements. And then last is marking tape is required as per the rule. So we often see that there's no marking tape in the trench. And then the last thing I'll mention is load calculations. So not completing a load calculation. Say we're adding supplementary loads to an electrical service, whether it be an air conditioning unit, a hot tub, EV charger, secondary suite with a lot of electric heat. Just ensuring that we're always doing that load calculation before we add those loads, and we're not going to overload like a 100 amp service. What we're seeing is our safety codes officers are requesting the load calculation, and it hasn't even been done. And then which can, once it's completed, if you're over the size of the electrical service, then you're looking at a service upgrade, which could be kind of costly to find out later on, right? So you want to know that up front.
Yeah, service upgrade will definitely increase the price of your hot tub by quite a bit if you're adding one in. So
I got a quick question here. If we were to go back to the overhead services we were speaking about a moment ago, so you mentioned the trade size 63. However, the possibility of reducing the size of that conduit, should the contractor be consulting with just the standata, or would it be a good idea for him to also just contact your tech center and speak with a safety codes officer?
Yeah, so I always recommend like the code, the minimum CE code requirements are what's law in Alberta and Calgary. So I'll always refer to the rules in the CE code, and then in Calgary, if there is a standata published, we follow the standata. So then refer to the standata, and if there's still questions, if you're unsure, it's always good to ask for permission rather than forgiveness. You can always, at that point, phone through and ask to speak to the technical assistance center.
One of the things that we have had a conversation with recently about is the use of the orange, brown, yellow conductors out in the field for 347-600. Now, we know, all of us know sitting here that the code doesn't specifically allow orange, brown, yellow for those different voltages, but it's a common code practice, common field installation practice. What are you guys seeing with that? And is there any change happening with that?
As you pointed out, Zach, for some time now, it's been trade practice in Alberta to use orange, brown, yellow to identify different slash voltages in a facility that has more than one slash voltage, so 347-600 or 277-480. But as far as we know, that has never been written into the code. We've done some review on this, and we've never been able to find it in the code. So now, since the CE code is the minimum standard and minimum requirement in Alberta by law, we are going back to what the code is written. And so Rule 4032 specifically talks about red, black, blue for identification of all slash voltages. And there's other parts of the rule too but nowhere in that rule is it written that OBY can be used, or orange, brown, yellow can be used to identify slash voltages. And then moreover, red, orange, brown, yellow, is to be used for isolated systems in patient care areas as per Rule 24208. And so we really want to get back to the minimum requirements of what the code is saying and requires. And so it's expected that if there's an installation happening in the city of Calgary, that the raceway systems or the junction box covers and panel covers and ways into that system are correctly identified with the voltages that are contained within.
Okay, so I have a question on that, and I think you may have answered it, but you'll maybe just give me some clarification here. So I've worked in dozens of high rises in downtown Calgary where the slash voltage 277 480, or more commonly 347 600, is used to supply lighting to floors, entire floor spaces, or maybe multiple floor spaces. So with the city now really just trying to work now with red, black, blue, in my existing system, if I was to do a reno on a floor that in the past was all fed with orange, brown, yellow, feeding lamps, but now we're going to LEDs or some other efficiency lighting situation, can I have red, black, blue in the same conduit, in the same junction box as existing orange, brown, yellow feeding that new retrofit?
Yeah, it's a very good question. So we've come up with 3 scenarios that mostly cover different installations. If it's a brand new installation, it should meet the requirements of the code, bottom line. And if it's a situation where, like say there's a 347 600 volt lighting panel that's on a floor as you identified, and all the existing wiring is being removed back to the panel, then all new wiring that's to go to the panel should be red, black, blue for that 347 600 volt lighting and power. Now, sometimes in high rises, a 347 600 volt panel could serve a few different floors. Now, if you're just doing a renovation on the one floor, so it's a tenant improvement, and there is that, there's that 3-phase 4-wire circuit brought out on the floor, it's orange, brown, yellow, I would say that would be carried on with orange, brown, yellow. The last thing we want to do is to create a situation where we're identifying with 2 different colors now. That would not be good. So those are generally the 3 scenarios. But what I do recommend, if you're starting a project and you're unsure, please contact us, Technical Assistance Center. You're starting the rough walls in the space, and you're wondering what to do with that lighting circuit. Get us there for that initial rough inspection, and go over with the safety codes officer on what you want to do for the lighting circuits, and we can provide that advice at that time.
It's amazing just to think. I mean, I have been out of like the field construction for 15 years now, but with the introduction now of LEDs, which were introduced a while ago, right? Those giant 347 volt, 600 volt panels that we used to feed all the lighting with now, I mean, they're almost obsolete.
Yeah, you could, one 4-wire circuit could do an entire floor now with the efficiency of that lighting.
So in terms of maybe punitive measures for not following, permitting requirements or permitting processes, what can contractors or homeowners expect to see?
Yeah, so a very good question. Permits are required under the Act, and so all construction, alterations, additions, new construction requires to be permitted, and so when there is non-code compliance or an unsafe condition that's identified by a safety codes officer, they will write a notice with their requirements to bring it up to code compliance or safety. And if those requirements are not met, one vehicle to compliance is an order under the Safety Codes Act. Now, generally the timelines of an order are like 35 days. It's a legal order to comply. It can be less depending on the situation. And if that fails, then there can be charges under the Safety Codes Act for non-compliance or not obtaining an electrical permit. But generally, yes, that we do want to see permits obtained in the city of Calgary, and it's ultimately the owner's responsibility to ensure that permits are obtained for the work that's being completed.
Adam, one thing I've noticed over the last couple, I guess years, maybe decade, is that the permitting process for both homeowners and contractors is becoming easier. So obviously we have technology now that's helping that along, but would you say that that's a goal of the inspections department, is to make that process easy and attainable for everyone to get a permit?
Yeah, no, great question. Absolutely. I think it's a corporate push to actually make online services more accessible. We have moved a lot of things online, and granted, permitting was online before COVID, but it will get easier to do this stuff online. Now, for electrical contractors, permits are instant release, and so regardless of what you're doing, you can pull a permit through currently the Vista system, and that's instant release. There may be some plans examination requirements, but those can come in after the permit's pulled. And homeowners can also pull permits online through the MyID piece once they create that MyID. Pretty soon, it's a little forward looking, but we are doing a project to create My Business ID. So the same sort of thing that homeowners have right now, but for businesses. And that'll replace the Vista ID for pulling permits. But we are constantly trying to improve our online services for customers.
Well, and there's no question that improving that system, and I think specifically, in my opinion, like getting homeowners the ability to pull permits and get an inspection is going to create better basement rough-ins and better installations from the homeowner. And hopefully they see that process is easy and they're not avoiding it because of difficulty, right? And I have heard that has been getting better. And speaking of homeowners versus contractors permits, maybe for a minute, what would be the difference between a homeowner's permit and a contractor's permit in terms of inspections? What's the difference there?
Yeah, so to obtain a homeowner's permit, you have to own and reside in the home, and you should have a basic knowledge of wiring and be competent to do that wiring. We also restrict what homeowners can pull permits for. So homeowners cannot pull permits for electrical service work. They can tie into the branch circuit wiring compartment of a panel, but they can't do anything upstream of that. They also cannot do solar PV installations because of the complexity, and they can't do in-ground swimming pools because of the complexity of those systems as well, like the bonding and grounding requirements. And then homeowners, we have to be able to see all of the wiring. So none of the wiring can be buried at time of inspection, and it can't be covered by drywall or any sort of finishing material or insulation or vapor barriers. So we want to be able to access like all the wiring, all the splices, and so it's quite a rigorous. It's quite a rigorous inspection. Contractors are slightly different depending on where the inspection is taking place and the job value. So we do have a quality management plan that has those requirements set out in the quality management plan.
Adam, with the inspections during COVID, I understand that you guys were doing some video inspections. Is that correct?
Yeah, that is correct, Jason. We were able to very quickly pivot, and we were given permission by the province to pivot to video inspections to keep construction going. And so we were doing remote video inspections using Google Duo app, and that allowed us to keep our workers and then the public safe. You can imagine on a daily basis we do 600 or so inspections, not just electrical, but I'm thinking of electrical, plumbing, gas, building, could be even more in some cases, and development inspections. I should add to that too. And so we were using this to try to reduce the touch points that we could have on a daily basis. We were using that for occupied residential, so that's your basement development and general renovation work. And then for some commercial installations as well, really where safety codes officers saw an opportunity to use a video inspection to reduce the amount of contact they would have with the public. So it's been helpful in helping us keep our staff and the public safe during the pandemic.
So yes, and of course during the pandemic, right, we've all been forced to take on these new challenges of new uses for technology. For some of us, it's been daunting. For others, they embrace it and have been using it for years. So coming out of COVID, if that was to happen soon, I cross my fingers. It seems like these video inspections would be something that might continue.
Yes, I see us using video inspections into the future, so I don't see them going anywhere. It's just, it may look different on how we do our video inspections and where we use those video inspections. We have realized some efficiencies, but we do want to use those video inspections for where they're appropriate. Like for example, the homeowner permits, we definitely want to do a site visit on the homeowner piece. It's more of a comprehensive inspection when you're there in person on site and able to do that inspection, as opposed to over video. So we're still working out the details on what that looks like for the future, but that's one of our projects.
When your contractors are calling into your technical assistance center, do they have the ability to send you guys video and or pictures of things that they're having questions with?
Yeah, we definitely use all those forms of communication with our customers, but it's very scenario specific. So it's really up to the safety codes officer whether they accept or communicate using picture or video.
So Adam, inspection department, they collaborate with the contractors, the electrical contractors. I imagine there's also some collaboration with NMAX, and I know maybe all three of them work together, contractor, NMAX, and inspections. The situation that comes to mind for me, I guess, would be in Calgary here. We're seeing a lot of infill houses come in where maybe a single family home that has probably a 100 amp, maybe even a 60 amp service come down, and in its place goes up a fourplex. So you're quadrupling the load or more with air conditioners and all that, probably going in the new houses. How does that relationship between NMAX, contractor, and inspections work?
The City of Calgary Electrical Inspection, we're the authority having jurisdiction under Part 1 of the Canadian Electrical Code. And then there is a demarcation point at some point, depending on if it's an overhead or underground service. So when we think about overhead, we think about overhead services in, say, the inner city, the demarcation point would be the weatherhead, for example. And MMAX is responsible to connect that electrical service with their overhead wiring or the triplex. Now, as under Part 1 of the Canadian Electrical Code, if we're taking down a single family dwelling and we're putting up a duplex or fourplex or whatever the case may be, of course we would do a demand on the service calculation to ensure that we can adequately service the new development. And then we the City of Calgary electrical inspection doesn't tie in with MMAX to ensure that MMAX can service that new development. It's actually up to the customer or the electrical contractor to get a hold of MMAX, and they can do that by emailing getconnected@mmax.com. And that's and MMAX will ensure that they can correctly service that that new development.
So in a situation such as that, demarcation point, just to be clear, is where essentially NMAX's responsibility would end from their conductor and it becomes the homeowners or the consumer service would take place. Okay. So in an underground situation, that would happen at the meter base?
No.
Okay.
That's a very good question. In the City of Calgary, for underground services, demarcation is actually the property line. So it's not a point of connection, which is unique.
Okay.
So yeah, and then for overhead services, it's the weatherhead. So just to reiterate that, for underground services, it's a property line, and then overhead services, it's the weatherhead.
Okay. Great. And then in a situation like that, you mentioned contractor contacts NMAX, get connected at nmax.com, just to ensure that they are okay to install a larger demand at that point. The utility grid can support it. Would they need to submit prints to the city inspection department? When are prints required to be submitted?
Yeah, so we do plans examination for electrical services that are 600 amps or larger and commercial. We don't, there are a few electrical services that are residential in the City of Calgary that are actually 600 amps or larger, but we don't require prints for that. And then we do require prints for solar PV, all solar PV installations at this time. And we reserve the right to request prints for complex installations. So if there's something we've never seen before, or it's fairly complex and we want information up front to review and then compile for the safety codes officer who's going to go there on site, we can request that. And underground installations, 1 and larger, to meet the Section 4 underground requirements or the IEEE 835. We want to know upfront that we're either installing to the prescriptive requirements in Section 4, or if there's a calculation being done to the standard, to the IEEE 835 underground standard. And so once we get all that information, we review it, and then we attach it to the permit, and the safety codes officer can go out and do their inspection based on what's compiled there.
All right. So a question that just kind of popped into my head here that we probably should have covered earlier on when we're looking at permitting. We always have questions about fire alarm systems. So do you need a building permit and a fire alarm permit, an electrical permit? When do you need both? When do you need one? Can I call the technical assistance center? And basically, Adam, how does all that work?
Yeah, so generally, if we're doing any sort of fire alarm work, we're going to need both a building permit and an electrical permit. There are very few scenarios where you may only need an electrical permit. So what I recommend, as you pointed out, if you're unsure, please call the Technical Assistance Center and ask to speak to a building SEO, and they can discuss your specific scenario with you and advise you on which permits are required.
The 2021 Canadian Electrical Code comes into adoption in Alberta February 1st of 2022. Adam, is there some changes to that electrical code that you'd like to kind of mention?
Yeah, so the biggest change in the 25th edition is the deletion of Table 39. And so now for residential services, you would select a conductor from Table 2 or 4. And so that's a major change. And we're currently working with MMAX on what that looks like. Because with the deep service program, they generally supply number 2 aluminum USCB 90 or 4-aught aluminum USCB 90. to single family dwellings and new subdivisions. So that's, it's a major change, and to go up to bigger conductor sizes is going to be quite an issue. So we're working through that challenge right now. I don't have a lot of details for you guys, but I want to come back with that. For overhead services, like if we're doing a service upgrade in inner city, it's generally easier because the electrician can just select what conductor they're going to install as per table 2 and 4, and then they can go up in size because the weatherhead is the utility demarcation point. And so MMAX can still keep their triplex sizing because that's under their utility code. So that's under Part 3 or the Alberta Utility Code. So that's the biggest change for the 2021 25th edition Canadian Electrical Code, and I will certainly keep you guys posted on how that on all the details and what that looks like for the future.
Okay, and that's great. Thank you so much for that. What I'd also like to just clarify right now is you guys will be inspecting based on the 25th edition of the code when the permit is pulled after February 1st. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Adam, that's great. Thank you so much for coming on and chatting with us about everything we've chatted about today with inspections. Like you mentioned, we're going to hold you to that, and we're going to bring you back for a follow-up in probably around February or something to see what the plan is with underground services. But I truly do appreciate your time, and thanks for coming on the show today.
Excellent. Thanks, Jason, and thanks, Zach. Appreciate you having me on the show.
Very appreciative today to have Adam on the show, to have an hour of his time to talk to us about just the processes and the procedures and what the inspection department's like. Definitely, we get asked questions about strange situations all the time when it comes to the code, and it was nice to talk to an inspector and get his feedback on that. What do you think, Zach?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, like you say, I really appreciate the time from Adam, and just having that time with any inspector. I mean, they have such a wealth of knowledge where they're going out and they're seeing so many different installations. And I love that he pointed out the technical assistance center, right? Making those inspectors available to people doing the installations in the field. So definitely an asset that, I mean, hopefully someone learned about that today and can use them moving forward.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. Like a lot of times when we're looking at those weird code situations now, it's just going to be simply call your safety codes officer, call 311, talk to someone in the technical assistance center. Hey, if it's fire alarm, you might have questions about building permits and electrical permits. So great topic of conversation there today.
What was a big takeaway for you?
Well, the orange, brown, yellow, of course, we talked about it, and I remember kind of looking at it, like shaking my head the first time I started pulling orange, brown, yellow 20 plus years ago. So it'll be interesting to see in the months that come how that's adopted in the industry. If everyone just quickly abandons orange, brown, yellow, or if they keep pulling it because they weren't aware of the change. So it'll be neat to see how that comes about. It does make sense, and it would be nice to have some sort of consistency throughout our trade, not just in our city, but obviously throughout the nation.
Yeah, it's one of those interesting trade practice conversations. I mean, technically nothing's changing now. We're just following the code as it has always been written. But yeah, I remember being an apprentice and for years pulling orange, brown, yellow, only to go to school to find out, well, that's not right. To then go back to site to be like, oh no, we always pull orange, brown, yellow. So yeah, it's an interesting application now and trying to follow the wording of the CE code. So it's good to see.
Yeah. And I mean, truthfully now, back in my day, we had giant 347/600 volt lighting panels, and those panels might not be used hardly at all anymore, at least to the full capacity they were in the past, just because of the changes in LED lighting. So yeah, so we continue to learn, and we'll look forward to talking to Adam hopefully in the new year.
Yeah, absolutely. And just also a big shout out to the city of Calgary as a whole. They were very easy to deal with to facilitate the recording of this podcast. And we do appreciate that openness and that willingness to come on the show. And of course, also thanks to all of our listeners who are here listening to this show. Jason and I are here trying to bring relevant conversations, and we'd love to hear from you. We want to know what you want to hear about. Please reach out to us, Facebook, Instagram. Let us know what you want to hear about on the show. You can connect with both of us on LinkedIn if you want. And please make sure you're subscribed, Apple, Google, Spotify, wherever you listen to podcasts, and tell your friends to get the word out there.
Just remember, this isn't a race to the bottom. It's a race to the top. Make sure you pull your permits and work safe, and we'll see you guys on the next episode.